good to see everybody this morning. We are working through our summer series on living out our faith. That's what we're talking about this summer. And this month in particular, we're looking at the book of James, which was written by James, the brother of Jesus. And it's a collection of advice, basically, for church leaders in the early church, and continues to be advice for church leaders today. The main issues in the book of James that Danny has pointed out in the last couple of weeks, let's get the first one up there if we can, Ryan, is controlling the tongue. Hard problem for most of us. James reminds us that we need to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, and that we should do more than we talk, that faith without works is dead. The second issue in James is a problem we have of favoring the rich. We shouldn't show favoritism to the rich, and that in Christian communities, equality is important, and that our main priority should be to care for the poor. And the third issue that James points out for us is changing our ideas of how we relate to the hardships in our life, understanding hardships in our lives. Trials and temptations build endurance, and they provide opportunities for us to grow in our faith. So those are the main issues that we find in the book of James, and we continue on today in chapter 3. If you want to read along, you can. I'm going to be starting at verse 13, or you can just listen. Hear these words, James chapter 3, starting at verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness, born of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not be boastful and false to the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, devilish. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. Will you pray with me? We thank you, gracious and loving God, for giving us your holy word. We ask you this morning to let the words from your holy scriptures fill our hearts and our souls. Send your Spirit to move among us. And Lord, let the words that come from my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing unto you. Amen. So about a month ago, I went with a friend of mine to a place I'd never been before. It was an indoor soccer match. My friend's niece is 6 years old, and she was playing indoor soccer, so I tagged along. So I walked in, and the first thing I saw when I walked in was a sign that said, "Please be respectful." I thought, well, I mean, that's just good advice in general, but why is this here? Is this a reminder for the kids? And then I saw another sign that said, "Remember, the kids are here to learn," and, kids are here to, and I'm like, what in the world is, it just seems strange to me, these signs that were up. So as the game is going, it's a close game, people get excited. One of the dads is at the wall, and he yells. And suddenly, a couple of employees came over and talked to him, and is it a ref or an umpire? Ref in soccer? Yeah. Ref points at him, and the guy, backs off, hands up. I looked at my friend, I said, what was that all about? It seemed a little intense for the situation. Well, come to find out, the parents had recently received a letter from the facility asking them to please not yell insults at their kids' opponents. That's right. Parents were asked not to yell insults at 6-year-old children. playing soccer. It gets better. A couple of weeks before that, two grown men got in a fist fight over the soccer game. Think about that. Two adults, two parents came to blows over a game of soccer played by 6-year-old girls. James asks, who is wise and understanding indeed? I hope that you will take a moment, not right now, but a little later in your day, to read John Paul's article that's in your bulletin this week. It's really good. And he's talking about our society, the way people treat each other, and the phrase he uses is that there's a heightened degree of division and anger. That's true. Division and anger. That's the way we operate these days. It seems like that any challenge to the way that I or we think is right or appropriate or acceptable, that's a personal attack on me or we. I or we have to be right and loudly. Have you noticed how loud everything is? Am I just getting old? Is that what it is? I don't think it's just that, but there's just noise everywhere, and everybody has an opinion on everything. Everybody's an expert. If you look on Facebook, social media, everybody is an expert in any given situation. You can take a tragedy. We've had several tragedies in our nation and around the world lately. The African American folks that were killed in their own church worshiping. The Marines who were killed this week. These tragedies become not opportunities for discourse. They become not opportunities for seeking justice. They become not opportunities to comfort grieving people. But instead, they become a reason for pointing fingers. They become a reason for calling for violent retribution, for political grandstanding about how I or we would handle the situation, and how much better things would be if I or we were in charge. And if you don't like how I or we feel, or if you don't like what I or we think, then I or we are just going to tell you a little bit more about how wrong you are. Show your good life, James says, that your works are done with gentleness, born of wisdom. My question is, where is gentleness? Where is wisdom? James tells us there's two kinds of wisdom. The first is earthly, and a word I love, devilish. Love that word choice. And it's born of bitter envy and selfish ambition. And the second is from above. It's pure and peaceable, gentle, yielding, impartial, sincere. Don't those words just make you feel better? Now, James talks about selfish ambition. There's nothing wrong with ambition. Doing your best, encouraging others like your 6-year-old to do their best at whatever they're working on. But the question is the motivation. What is the driving force? Is it something pure and true? Or is it a desperate need to win? To have the most stuff? To be right? To feel superior? My experience at that soccer game reminded me of a movie that came out probably 25 years ago called Parenthood. And then later there was a show based on that same movie. Steve Martin's in it. He plays a guy named Gil. And he's kind of this neurotic guy, and he wants everything in his life to be wrapped up in a perfect little box, you know? He wants everything to be neat and tidy, and that doesn't work out so well for him, as you can imagine, because life isn't that way. He's having trouble at work. His kids don't fit the standard mold, and his oldest son suffers from anxiety, wonder why, and at one point in the film, his son has this unexpected moment of glory. He's playing baseball, and a kid knocks up a pop-up, and another kid's running trying to get it. He just kind of stands there and watches it, and he catches it, and they win the game. Steve Martin's character is so happy because he never gets to do this. He never gets to celebrate over his kid having an athletic victory, and he makes a fool of himself in front of the other parents and in front of the kids, just celebrating. He's a little embarrassed by that. Then he finds out he's lost his job, and his wife is pregnant with their fourth kid, and he's at his wits' end. Gil is so worried and so busy complaining and making noise that he can't even recognize the wisdom that comes to him from his so-called senile grandmother. What this grandmother said to him is exactly what James is telling us, that life's challenges are opportunities for growth. Life is a roller coaster, and it's messy, and it's hard, and it's fun, and it's infuriating, and it's wonderful. Wisdom surrounds us, but unfortunately, in growing numbers, we are too busy talking and complaining to recognize it. You know who I really think is remarkable are the Quakers. They share with us the belief, the priesthood of all believers, which is the idea that everybody is known by God and that everybody can know God in a direct relationship. In traditional Quaker worship, it's called waiting worship. And they just sit in silence, quietly. And they wait. They listen. And because every person is directly connected with God, if someone is led by the Spirit to say something, they believe that God is speaking to them through that person. Sometimes they'll sit for a whole hour or more, and nobody will say anything. I know y'all are sitting there thinking, please don't make us do that. I'm not going to. But the Quakers are guided by some simple principles, which are simplicity, integrity, peace, and equality. But you know what else the Quakers are known for? Work. The Quakers are known for work. Faith without works is dead, James said, and they have a long history of working for justice, working actively for justice and for peace. They are quick to listen and slow to speak. That, brothers and sisters, is the good life shown by works, done with gentleness, born of wisdom. That is what Jesus is talking about when he says wisdom is proved right by her deeds. Now, I'm not saying that we need to turn Quaker, because they ain't got no preachers, and I'd be out of a job. But they show us what peace can be found in silence. We can incorporate some of that into our lives, into our worship, into our faith, and into our world. Ecclesiastes tells us that there is a time for everything, and there is a time to speak. We should never sit idly by and let injustice be done or condone injustice by not speaking. But there is a time for silence. And I think in our world, we could do with a little space to listen for God's voice as we do our works with gentleness and mercy. Listen, and peace be with you.